arid climate like ours, water is essential for life. And so we're actually designing a landscape that not only helps capture and soak more rainwater and snowmelt, but we're also taking these concepts to our personal garden designs, which are simply called rain gardens. And these designs are not only meant to capture and store more of the water, but also to help build soil and contributes to a regenerative garden design system. What's going on, everyone? I'm Brandon, and welcome to the Greening the Desert Project. What are rain gardens or rain garden designs? Simply put, rain gardens or the design features are Simply put, they're just depressions in the ground, and we can get creative with how we design these rain gardens and just the forms and the features that they have. And with that knowledge, that's where we've actually taken the permaculture approach in slowing and stopping as much of the rainwater as we can on our landscape. But for our personal gardens, we're actually implementing these rain garden features so that we're able to harvest as much of the rainwater as we can, especially during the monsoon season. And it's also just as crucial during the winter time because where we're at, we actually do receive snow, and we had just gotten a heavy dump of snow the other week. So you can check that video out in the corner there. So it's not only about the water harvesting, but it's actually the fact that we'll end up having to water plants and vegetables, everything in our garden areas way less. And when we do actually have to water the plants or our garden spaces, the water will be more so contained within the spaces and directed to where we want it to go, which is to the plants. I'm standing where I'm going to be doing our multi-tier or multi-step terrace system here. And these aren't just any terraces. These terraces are actually going to be embedded in the swale that we've already built, which accompanies all the rainwater harvesting practices and techniques that we're also doing around here. So I want to show you the rainwater harvesting garden area we've got set up and how this multi-terrace fits into the whole design. So we've got our first terrace area set up. This terrace sits on the bottom of our swale that sits on contour here. And actually beforehand, this was all chiseled out. So we have a contour line, and then we have a rough draft of a basin, and that enabled us to kind of get creative with this. So now we can have our first terrace at the bottom where there's going to be the abundance of moisture, and so we'll be able to choose plants and vegetation appropriate for the amount of water that will definitely be flooding this area. And then it's also with the mound on the back side of this that we're providing extra protection from wind and dust and a whole lot of the elements basically. So we're creating essentially a small microclimate within this terrace. And since this is the bottom terrace, this could be more susceptible to erosion if we're not careful. So we're actually going to be stacking a whole lot more rocks, especially on the exit and entrance points. But it's also the benefit of the swale that we've created this on-level trench berm, so to speak, that is slowing the water and lowering the momentum of the water. So we're getting more of a slow flooding effect on this contour swale as opposed to the water just rushing down in one continuous stream, basically. I got a little ahead of myself, but I had started the second terrace, so we'll have the second terrace lined out as well as we'll get more rocks stacked on the edge here, so we'll allow for a footpath for one, so we can have easy access to the garden beds, but then also we're going to build up the soil layer slightly so that this terrace sits slightly higher than the bottom terrace. And so with building this terrace up, that'll enable the first terrace to be flooded out essentially, and it'll be less water that will flood the second terrace. So we can choose a different variety of vegetation and plants or trees that will work that don't need as much water or don't really like having wet feet or being flooded out. It's a big advantage that we have on our property with the abundance of juniper trees that we have. We actually have the abundance of organic material already composted, full of life, microbial activity, all the good stuff. So we'll be using a lot of the material from underneath the trees because they definitely can use some cleaning underneath them, and it's not a bad thing. But then we can take a lot of that organic material and know that it's at least good fertile soil so that we can start planting all kinds of native grasses, shrubs, bushes. But then it's also adding the compost that we're creating here on top of it to add even more biology, more nutrients, and so we can grow that much more stuff here. So the material under the trees will be a really good source because it's free for us and we don't have to buy soil, but it's stuff that we can amend with compost to create our own custom little soil mix. But it's also how we'll be making a majority of our garden beds around here. So now we've got our double terrace system set up, capitalizing on the swale that we have to create basically 2 garden beds out of 1 swale. And we still actually need to lay down compost, and then we'll actually get some mulch in, and we're still kind of a little ways from planting actually. We're just getting into spring really here, so we still want to wait because we still have a danger of frost, maybe snow, who knows. So we want to take our time. We've still got plenty more garden beds to design and build in this area in general. So we've got more waffle gardens, more terraces, more zuni bowls, and all kinds of basins. And I think this really just shows too that we can do these contour swales or these different earthworks, but we also don't have to just stick to the basics of things. We can actually get more creative in our designs, just with this example, taking a standard swale that's already slowing and stopping water, but now we're transforming it into a garden area that we know will also harvest more water so that we can grow a lot more plants. And speaking of plants, that's where the Gabion Wallapini actually has come in. So we've actually only got half of the Gabion completely finished. We still have a whole second part to do with this. But the Gabion has actually enabled us to start a whole lot of our seeds, a lot of our tree cuttings, and a lot of the native vegetation that we'll need to get started with the season here. But we're also starting small, and we're not going full ham on all the different trees and fruit trees and stuff like that we can do. So we're actually choosing carefully a lot of native plants that are within our area. But then we're also doing non-native plants, which include the medicinal plants that everyone knows and loves. But we also have a native grapevine that we're starting to grow up from the cuttings that a friend had given us. And then we're actually working with 3 different kinds of mulberry varieties here. So we have a Texas mulberry, a dwarf ever-bearing mulberry, and a regular white mulberry. And along with that, we've got elderberry cuttings, we've got native flower mixes, we've got cover crops, we've got a lot of stuff that we're going to be starting, and that's where the Gabion has really helped us out with getting the jump start on this season. And that's also one thing with the different varieties of vegetation and trees and shrubs and bushes that we do have and what we're going to be planting, because we also are on limited water. Not that we can't get water delivered, but we also want to just keep in mind the water usage that we're going to be using for all of this vegetation. So that's where all the rain garden design and all these rainwater harvesting practices come into play, so that it gives us a better chance of growing all this vegetation, but also at the same time lowering of the work that we need to do in order to keep the vegetation growing and propagated. Then we also have a variety of willow trees that come from only a few miles up the road from us from our friend's property. And most of the cultivars and varieties of stuff that we have the experience to know that it does work, especially in our environment with the high heat, the soil quality, the amount of rain, and so on. But then we're also choosing vegetation that comes from our native area, at least within a certain radius, but we'll know that it will work given that it's a native plant. So now that we've been able to cover all of our rainwater harvesting practices and features, as well as the rain garden designs, it does beg the question, well, how do I start all of this on a brand new, fresh property?